The aftermath of the digital disorder caused by Kakao continues, as the extensive service outage offered the nation a frightening taste of the potential dangers to security and of monopoly. So how extensive are the services offered by Kakao? What are the dangers of platform monopolies in terms of service and security? And what should be done to prevent a similar digital disruption? Welcome to Issues and Insiders. Indeed, the aftermath of the chaos caused by Kakao continues, with Monday seeing a parliamentary audit of the causes behind the service disruption, the compensation to be offered and the potential countermeasures ahead. For more, I have Professor Lee Wonjae of the Graduate School of Culture Technology at KAIST. Professor Lee, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Hello.
I also have Professor Park Kyung-sin of Law at Korea University live on the line as well. Professor Park, it's good to have you with us.
Pleasure is mine. Thank you.
Right. Professor Lee, we'll start with you then. Let's begin with a few words on the extensive services, online services that is, provided by Kakao Corporation.
Thanks for having me on this show today. As of 2021, Kakao has 158 child companies of finance, entertainment and games, transportation, and even golf and beauty. It is true that Kakao is a big, excessively diversified, and therefore increasingly dominating Korean domestic market. But I'm not sure Korean consumers are really dominated by Kakao. Except for the messaging app and taxi, other platform services are heavily competitive in South Korea. Kakao's market status is not as strong as we think, which means Kakao should be more serious in dealing with the accident than they were in the beginning.
Right, I see. And that being said, Professor Park, as mentioned earlier, one major concern raised amid the service disruption of Kakao was that related to monopoly. First of all, very generally speaking, Professor Park, what are the dangers of platform monopolies?
Well, we already know the general harms of monopoly, higher price for consumers. Monopolies have less incentive to cut cost, and they so rather become less innovative in investment in production, and that means that there will be inefficiency in allocating resources in different productions, and there will be, because the price will be higher in monopolized market, there will be people who will not consume the products that they would have in the competitive market. And also, they may have a monopsony power, means they'll pay lower wages to workers and they'll pay less to the raw material providers. Now, as to platform monopolies, the main problem comes from vertical integration. Basically, that the platform becomes basis, essential facility for other businesses like banking, taxi, ride hailing. So in this case, Kakao has a very high market percentage, market share in chat app, and that chat app becomes a platform for other businesses. And if Kakao wanted to, I'm not saying Kakao has done, but Kakao can abuse the market power in the chat app and use that to increase their market share in ride-hailing, banking, by preferencing their own goods and services. But as Dr. Lee, as Professor Lee has just said, it's not clear whether Kakao actually has engaged in such abusive behavior, because as Professor Lee said, in these other services, other non-chat app services, Kakao's market share is not that high. Looking at the data center fire and the aftermath through the lens of a monopoly or platform monopoly may not be appropriate.
Right. Professor Lee, so while their market shares in the real-time messaging may not be that high, the first reality, though, is that they do account for quite a number of online services, including, as Professor Park mentioned, ride-hailing, there's payment, there is reservation, we have entertainment as well offered by Kakao Corporation. That being said, how do you explain, Professor Lee, Kakao's extensive, perhaps, expansion in so many diverse market fields?
So like I said, and Professor Park just said, I'm not sure Kakao has been successful in every domain it has a business. Also, the number of companies inadvertently increased as they bought out business already composed of multiple companies. Kakao pitched a lot of balls and probably expected 1 or 2 strikes. Please don't forget, Kakao is not a big player in the global market. Kakao Talk has a service only 1 country and has a monopoly status. Globally, we can find only 3 other countries as such: China, Vietnam, and Qatar. Global platform companies like Facebook and Amazon have a smaller number of child companies because they are all geared toward profitability. In contrast, small companies dominating small market like Kakao are inclined to security and stability. That would be the key reason behind Kakao's extensive diversification.
Professor Park, to what extent are fair trade authorities here in the country aware, perhaps, of potential extensive business ventures by platforms like online? Do we have any safety regulations or efforts as such to deal with potential monopolies in the future?
I was muted, sorry. Well, fair trade authorities were aware of Kakao's expansion, but you have to understand the history behind it. There was a culture, or there was an initiative by the government to encourage Kakao and Neighbor, one of the early successful platforms or early successful businesses, internet businesses, to invest in startups. Because one of the criticism was that Korean big businesses do not invest in small startups in Korea. Thereby, the success is not replicated in other fields. So the government rather encouraged Kakao and Neighbor to buy more and more startups in diverse fields. That's one reason. Another reason that Kakao has become diversified is what data scientists call function creep. By function creep, we mean that once there is a reliable identity verification method, more and more services use that identity verification method in giving out the services. Now, as you know, in Korea, for instance, resident registration number, 주민등록번호, has suffered from a lot of function creep. You need that number to seek medical services. You need that number to borrow a book from public library. And just like, and because resident registration number was so popular as an identity verification method, too many services requested that number for verification purposes. And later, that number became a key or linkage to connect the data in all these different fields. So the potential for privacy breach became really aggravated. And in the same logic, Kakao became, using because KakaoTalk is linked to a smartphone, which is again linked to the person's, the owner's mobility, Kakao became a very convenient and efficient method of identity verification. And then Kakao became, because there are so many services requiring identity verification in Korea, Kakao became a very important tool. Kakao became a because Kakao's market share in chat app is so high, Kakao became a go-to tool, very successful tool, very popular tool among the service providers in checking the identity of the users. So more and more services had the potential for easy integration into KakaoTalk. So the second cultural trend that has encouraged Kakao's diversification, I believe, is the Korean culture of data collection, meaning requiring identity verification for a lot of services.
Right. And beyond Kakao then, Professor Lee, some pundits say that risk management is not a strong suit of corporate Korea. What are your thoughts on that?
So, given the size of the domestic market, it is not surprising Korean platform companies are investing less in risk management. The United States alone takes into account 40% of a global IT security market, followed by Europe, China, and Japan. However, Asian IT security market is fast growing and expected to catch up Europe in the next few years. I hope Kakao accident could make a good learning process toward a world-class IT security in South Korea too.
Right, I hope so as well. Professor Park, aside from concerns of a monopoly, Kakao's service terminal also prompted security fears. To what extent are these fears valid? Very briefly speaking, Professor Park.
Well, the fire broke out in data center. I think one problem is that Kakao, such a big internet business, doesn't have its own data center, and Kakao is building two data centers as we are speaking, I heard. And hopefully, when they can manage their own data center, maybe they can make a more balanced decision when when an inevitable fire breaks out in their data centers, balancing between the inconvenience to the users and the severity of fire. Here, one of the reasons that the incident had a lot of impact was because the power to the entire building was shut down, and there's a question whether it could have been avoided.
And amid these concerns over security as well as monopoly, Professor Yi, what can users do perhaps to better ensure safe digital interactions?
So one of the lessons consumers got from this accident is that consumers are also in need of diversifying their digital tools and services. However, there are good reasons we can't do this easily. We get a benefit when the platform service is dominating. We may call this a positive externality of monopoly. We are using KakaoTalk because my family are using this. For the same reason, Kakao's dominating status would not change soon because of some part of Korean population, old and senior in particular. It is hard for them to change their familiar IT services soon. We may ask the government and industry to open up the domestic market to give better opportunities to global services. So the competition pressure motivates Korean companies to make their services better.
Right, I see. All right, Professor, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts. And Professor Park, thank you very much for your insights today.
Thank you.
Right, and on that note, we say goodbye. We'll be back same time tomorrow. That is Tuesday. Join us then. Thank you for now.